This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Dozens still missing following Monday's boat capsize in the DR Congo lake. UN concerned over increased fighting in the Libyan capital Tripoli. And ousting of President Omar al-Bashir sparks violence in Darfur, according to the United Nations. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour, Zimbabwe to withdraw mining claims from companies that take too long to exploit the minerals. And in your sport, Tottenham Hotspurs and Liverpool joined Barcelona and Ajax in the UEFA Champions League's Final Four. Let's start with the latest on the rescue efforts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Authorities in the country continue to search for missing persons after a boat accident on Monday on Lake Kivu. Around 20 people were killed and 37 passengers rescued. President Felix Tshisekedi is due to visit the scene of the incident and provide an official death toll. Boat accidents are common in the Congo, with most frequently loaded well beyond their capacity.
From what we understand, the boat was in a deplorable state. In partnership with the Minister of Transportation in North Kivu, we have instructed all their technical teams to ensure that no boat leaves without proper checks and permissions.
Well, let's get more on this now. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa is on the line from Kinshasa. Chris, authorities say 150 people are missing from this tragedy. Through the official passenger list, it suggests that only about 50 people were on board the vessel. Could you clarify this for us?
Yes, we have spoken to some officials in the government, and they're saying there were about 50 people officially on board that vessel. But there have been conflicting reports from members of the civil society who were saying that they had between 150 and 265. So the government is saying that the figure was much less. But then we heard a message from the president expressing his condolences to the 150 people who were reported missing. And so we don't know exactly what that figure is, because the government is saying one thing, the president has issued condolences to 150, and so many people are now confused. They don't know what the exact figure is.
President Tshisekedi, though, is due to visit the scene of the accident. What should we expect from this visit?
Yeah, one is that he is going to make a very strong statement about this kind of mishap, because they have been happening around the DRC for quite some time. People have been blaming it on negligence by the authorities to service these vessels, and normally overloading is another problem. And so the president is going to issue a very stern warning about the people who were responsible for this. They might be punished. That's what many people are waiting to hear from him.
All right, Chris Ochamringa joining us there on the line from Kinshasa with that update on the boat accident in the Congo. And moving on to Sudan, a South Sudanese leader, President Salva Kiir, has offered to help mediate a political transition in Sudan. Kiir's office said he was ready to support the democratic aspirations of his former adversary in Khartoum and help bring about a peaceful transition. Meanwhile, protesters continue their month-long call for democratic civilian rule following the military council's takeover since President Omar al-Bashir's ouster. On Wednesday, medical professionals took to the streets calling for change and a civilian leadership. In the meantime, the joint UN-African Union envoy in Darfur security across the volatile Darfur region of Sudan has deteriorated since last week's military takeover in Khartoum. The African Union Joint Special Representative Jeremiah Mamabolo told the UN Security Council that violent incidents had been reported in various areas, including the Kalma camp, housing thousands of the internally displaced who fled fighting in Darfur.
Darfur is not and cannot be immune from what is happening at the national level. The incidence of violence in Darfur IDP camps in reaction to the events in Khartoum attest to the fragility of the security situation in Darfur, which had hitherto been increasingly calm and stable. The current situation, much as it may not be desirable, provides a chance for the Sudanese to seize the opportunity to resolve all their conflicts, including the one in Darfur. Council should urge the people of Sudan to have a holistic and all-inclusive approach that is representative of all Sudanese.
Well, let's cross over to Cairo now to discuss the latest developments in Sudan. I'm joined by Dr. Nabil Negum Eldin. He's an independent researcher and author of International Politics. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Now, protesters are still out there demanding the immediate return to civilian rule. In your opinion, what consequence will the democratization of Sudan have on North African politics, especially Egypt?
I do believe that what is going on in Sudan now, it's quite delicate, because people in the streets are not satisfied with the latest developments in Khartoum. And they are asking for restoring the civil governing in that country after 3 decades of the Islamic National Front regime. Mr. Bashir, who is now has moved last night to Kuber, the high security prison in Khartoum, has really managed to divide and make the country pay a heavy price on the political and economical levels.
Well, the people are still demanding structural changes in the system, though, Dr. Eldin. And for a country that has been under one regime for more than 30 years, what are the challenges that lie ahead?
I think the Military Transitional Council has got to really react more positively and rapidly with the demands of the Sudanese people. Sudanese people will not back down. They will not go home. They had enough. There is a lack of food, gas, and even cash when you go to an ATM machine. If I give you some indication about the hardship of Sudanese people, they have inflation rate of almost 130%. That is the inflation rate in Sudan. There's 13% of the Sudanese population are suffering a severe lack of food. There is unemployment of 30% between the youth and 27% between the public. The deficit is almost about 50, and the balance of payment is almost $50 billion. The foreign debt is $65 billion. Now, Sudanese people want to hand power to a civil cabinet which is able to satisfy the real demands of the people.
Right, but what should authorities at the moment do, though? What should they do in the country to ensure that there is a peaceful transition?
I think what's going on in Sudan is going to affect the neighboring countries, especially in North Africa, maybe in Western Africa too. So Sudan is not a small fish in the area, and what's going to be coming out of the Sudanese uprising is going to be, or is going to have repercussions in the other neighboring countries.
All right, we leave it there. Dr. Nabil Eldin joining us there from Cairo with that update. Thank you. Let's now turn to Libya, where fighting continues. According to the United Nations, Tripoli has witnessed the heaviest fighting since the outbreak of clashes with indiscriminate rocket fire on a high-density neighborhood in the Libyan capital. For the past 2 weeks, General Khalifa Haftar's LNA troops have been advancing towards Tripoli. Fighting broke the world record for the highest number of displacements in one day. 4,500 people were displaced, bringing the total to 25,000.
We can report that throughout the night, Tripoli witnessed the heaviest fighting since the outbreak of the clashes, with indiscriminate rocket fire on a high-density neighborhood in the Libyan capital. At least 5 civilians have been reportedly killed and several others injured. The Secretary General's Special Representative in Libya, Ghassan Salameh, condemned in the strongest terms the overnight shelling, recalling that responsibility for actions that may constitute war crimes now lies not only with the individuals who committed the indiscriminate attacks, but also potentially with those who ordered them.
Well, let's get more on this developing story and speak to our correspondent Guy Henderson. He's in Benghazi in eastern Libya, where Commander Haftar's forces are based. Guy, fighting continues despite calls for a ceasefire. Can you give us the latest on the situation in Libya?
Yeah, definitely mounting concerns about the humanitarian cost of this offensive at the moment. The UN is reporting that 25,000 people or so now have been displaced as a result of the fighting around the outskirts and increasingly closer towards central Tripoli as well, sometimes in some very densely populated civilian areas, each side blaming the other for who is responsible for the shelling of those civilian areas. And a lot of increasing concern internationally as well. We've had countries like Italy and Germany expressing concern about the idea of thousands more refugees, possibly hundreds more thousands of refugees making their way, escaping from the fighting in Libya and potentially heading up towards Italy, towards Germany, as they have in years past, which of course has caused so many political ruptures on that continent. We've also got the United Kingdom, which is trying to put together a resolution at the UN Security Council at the moment for some sort of call for a ceasefire, a pause. But my understanding is that there is a lot of opposition to some of the wording in that UK drafted statement that at the moment. Not a lot of progress on it, perhaps not even moving towards a vote this week. So, no imminent sign there of a united front in terms of applying international pressure, just to create some sort of humanitarian pause so that aid agencies can get in and do the work they need. There's understood to be quite a lot of people who are still trapped and they just don't know, should they stay in their homes, should they try and escape their homes and in the process, risk being killed or maimed, women and children amongst them, as they try to flee. One of the theories as to why the Eastern Authority might be quite reluctant to bring about a pause, we spoke to an Eastern MP about this last night here in Benghazi, is down to money essentially, because officials here say that the Tripoli government is not sending funds to the east. A lot of the oil lies within the territory of General Khalifa Haftar, but Tripoli still controls the revenue from that oil because Haftar would find it difficult to sell that oil on international markets himself. And so there is one thought is that the LNA, that is Haftar's forces, may feel they don't actually have time on their side for a long fight because they are running out of money to do so. Yes, they have international support that can prop them up from countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but certainly a question there about whether the Haftar's forces can sustain themselves in any protracted conflict.
All right, Guy Henderson joining us there from Benghazi in eastern Libya. Well, as fighting rages on, Libyans living on the outskirts of the city are seeking shelter in a school closer to the center of the capital. CGTN's Tulisha Balala has more.
This old factory in Tripoli is now a makeshift shelter for civilians uprooted by conflict. More than 18,000 people have been displaced by a 2-week offensive by forces from eastern Libya trying to take the capital from the internationally recognized government.
I'm a housewife and I have 5 young ones. When the clashes broke out and the sound of bombings became strong, I knew I had to leave with the kids. After we left, we received news that some of our neighbors were killed and wounded.
Around 47 families are housed in this camp, with up to 6 individuals in each small room.
Of course, the number of families currently residing here is 11. Each family is of course made up of several members, boys and girls, and every day the numbers increase.
Many civilians have been unable to leave the southern districts of Tripoli.
Most of the displaced families are being hosted by the residents. Some people have offered their homes and comfort. Most of them are people who came through the town borders in Wadi Rabea and an area called Lofter.
Despite the help offered by locals and businesses, for those families arriving here, authorities say it's going to be a challenge to find shelter for them as the numbers increase. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
In Egypt, the Elections Committee has announced the date for the referendum, which will start on April the 20th. The changes give the Egyptian president additional powers and extends his office term until 2030. But politicians say El-Sisi should be given a chance to complete his economic and security reforms. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has more.
Cairo's landscape is covered with massive numbers of banners, all encouraging citizens to vote in the upcoming referendum. On Wednesday, and just 2 days before the vote begins, the president of the Elections Committee called for huge participation as he announced the referendum details.
I tell the youth, shut your ears away from the calls of boycott and participate to voice your opinion. The people's will is more superior to the constitution. We return the matter to you to vote on. The referendum is considered one of the most important democratic rights. Your nation is calling you to say your opinion.
Egyptians will start voting on April 20th. Egyptian members of parliament say they want the president to get more time in office to complete his reform vision. Since he took office, El-Sisi has taken bold measures. He has gradually lifted power subsidies and enforced some austerity measures on the government.
The massive move in petroleum exploration has made Egypt own one of the biggest natural gas reserves in the world. The country is building 22 new cities. For the first time, Upper Egypt is building infrastructure that this region has not seen in 40 years. All these will make Egypt among the world's top 20 economies.
To increase the turnout, the ballots will be open for 3 days until April 22.
Opposition powers have rejected the constitutional amendments, but instead of their usual stance of boycotting, they have decided to vote no. So there's a huge turnout expected this weekend. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. IGAD member states urged to scale up drought response. And we tell you why an Egyptian company is granting women an extra day off work.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
The ongoing drought in the Horn of Africa is triggering a regional humanitarian crisis. The Intergovernmental Authority on Development and East African Trade Bloc is saying that over 23 million people are in need of emergency food assistance. They are urging member states to scale up a drought response. Almost all of Somalia and parts of Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda and South Sudan are areas of concern. IGAD warns that these countries are likely to receive less rainfall later in the year.
Right now, those groups are being seen to be people who are in kind of a drought stress level situation, with a possibility of, with pockets of emergency almost, and of course getting into that area. So what do you want to now pass to our member states that constitute IGAD as a region? We call upon our member states to operationalize what we call their contingency plans.
The problem that we see potentially is that in the arid and semi-arid land, there is a large caseload of people, millions of people, who are in what we call IPC phase 2, the stress phase. These people are moderately meeting their daily food consumption or marginally meeting it, but they are facing some difficulties to meet their non-food expenditures, and they are very often to engage into coping strategies that are very hard on them.
A small Egyptian company has sparked controversy after its management decided to give an additional paid day off every month for women. This day is dedicated to ease the physical pressure on female employees during their first day of the menstrual cycle. Our correspondent Adel Mahroui has the story.
An initiative from an Egyptian magazine has inspired the founders of this digital marketing company. It was calling employers in the country to give women days off during their menstrual cycle.
I found that during that time, many women suffer. They feel pain and usually feel uncomfortable. Already many employees would take the first day off. All I did was simply to cancel the deduction from their leave, so it became a paid day off.
On her first menstrual day, an employee could report to the HR manager her day off. Confidentiality is well preserved, so she won't have to report to anyone else, nor is she obliged to provide medical proof. During urgent assignments, she can work at home.
It was awkward at first when this decision was made, but then we realized with great appreciation for our work, we used to be very tired. We had low power and had to come to work despite having little concentration. It became a relief now that we have the option to take the day off.
It had a huge impact on the work environment when you see the management cares about you. Employees feel that they are the priority, and that gets the job done with passion.
Despite such performance benefits, the company has sparked controversy in Egypt.
We've seen resistance and criticism against our decision. Some thought we're giving the whole week off for our women employees, and others feared that it would create a movement for women to call for the same day off. They claim girls would abuse it, but I have trust in my employees.
Employers here have become the first in Egypt to provide that privilege to female employees. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Côte d'Ivoire, a growing number of women are exploring the possibility of political careers. However, many are unaware of the laws and rules of local elections. To address this, a seminar was organized by a local women's group civil society organization in the capital Abidjan to train women from political parties countrywide. This is the first phase of the trainings that will be given to all women. The political authorities praised this initiative while promising to continue the policy of openness that will establish gender parity in the political space.
This training is to teach these trainers to teach potential candidates to dare. We also want to teach them how to prepare a meeting, how to prepare a program, a bill, how to ensure that women with potential dare to run as candidates.
This training will have an impact on the ground insofar as it is based on what we have identified as a lack of women candidates or women in politics. This seminar is therefore filling gaps, and I'm convinced that this training will help to change things.
I was a candidate in the 2016 legislative elections. But I had many challenges because being a woman, not having enough resources, and not being adequately trained, it was complicated. This training taught us to assume and better equip ourselves before going to an election, because elections are prepared years before through training and information.
The leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has supervised the test fire of a new tactical guided weapon. Kim Jong-un describes the weapon as one of significance in increasing the combat power of his army. DPRK state media reports Wednesday's test was conducted in various modes of firing at different targets. Pyongyang did not release the type of the tested arms, but some analysts say it is highly likely to be a short-range cruise missile. Earlier this week, Kim visited the country's air and anti-aircraft force. He inspected a flight drill while expressing great satisfaction at their combat readiness. All these moves come after the collapse of the second Kim-Trump summit in Hanoi in February, which ended without any agreement on the DPRK's nuclear program. And South Korean news agency Yonhap reports that DPRK leader Kim Jong-un may hold his first ever summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin next week. Another source says there have been signals hinting the DPRK is making preparations. There's a speculation the summit might be imminent as DPRK and Russian senior officials have traveled to each other's capital. Moscow has yet to confirm a date, but Russia's TASS news agency reports Moscow and Pyongyang are discussing Kim's trip to Russia through diplomatic channels. Now, for a long time, replenishment and logistical support was a bottleneck that kept the People's Liberation Army Navy from open water missions. Now, the Navy has made a priority of building up that support in its expansion plans. Today, in our special series, Red Star Blue Water, our CGTN correspondent Han Bing is embedded in a training mission to see what's being done.
Their day begins before sunrise. Modernization isn't just about new equipment, and the military is not all about combat.
明白.
Logistics are at the heart of any operation. It's the coordination between personnel and hardware.
机电呢，就是主要为舰船提供这个动力、电力，包括生活设施的一些保障，是舰艇的心脏。24小时工作，你24小时都基本上处于这个高温、高湿、高热，还有高噪音的环境当中。
Doji Chow works at the bottom of the ship, the power control room. Hidden from most of the crew, but is key for the mission.
就是说我们训练任务紧，所以这个时候就要求我们利用点滴时间，就是说把这个机器或者提前给它维护、检查、巡检。舰艇的话，它是这个紧密协同要求比较高的一个系统链。如果某一个系统链断了，就是说有可能造成我们就是任务就是无法执行。
It's said an army marches on its stomach. The cooks compete to serve up the best on budget.
空间有限，出海的话，风浪大的话，这个左右摇摆的幅度比较大。参军入伍嘛，都要上战场，然后突然分到这个岗位的时候，还有点不适应，心里有个抵触情绪。然后现在感觉慢慢的就热爱上这个行业。每次做完饭之后下来，大家都是对这个饭菜的表扬，自己感到很满足。
Zhang Mengfei learned all his cooking skills on board. The crew needs fuel, just like the ship.
近几年，随着这个改革强军的稳步推进，以及部队编制体制的调整优化，后勤建设这方面呢，要求越来越法制化、规范化、精准化和高效化。
领导对这个后勤保障这一块要求提得很高，然后我们也是不断的提升自己。
Food costs have been steadily rising, and it's hard to get fresh vegetables during blue water training. The Navy is working on getting replenishment capacity up to speed.
编队的补给训练已经常态化了。随着我们舰艇远洋训练的增多，步伐迈得越来越远，必须要这个实行补给。那么这种实行多舰次的横向和纵向的这种补给方式现在已经非常常见，也是我们训练中的重要的科目之一。
Today's task is refueling.
今天呢，能见度也不是很好，在这种情况下呢，我们组织了4条舰的两两正横和纵向的这种补给训练，应该也体现了这个官兵们平时的训练水平。
To outsiders, logistics are often invisible, but they are key for efficiency. The Navy cannot run without these support staff, and the true, real success will be measured when the overall capabilities are tested.
Han Bin, CGTN from the East China Sea.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. U.S. first daughter Ivanka Trump concludes Africa tour with a $2 million pledge to women in Côte d'Ivoire's cocoa industry. And Zimbabwe to withdraw mining claims from companies that take too long to exploit the minerals.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
We come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
White House advisor and U.S. President Donald Trump's eldest daughter, Ivanka Trump, has concluded her Africa trip in Côte d'Ivoire. It was the second stop in her Africa tour that kicked off in Ethiopia. Ivanka announced a $2 million investment for women in Côte d'Ivoire's cocoa industry. The money will be used to diversify commerce and supplement the income for the workers in the sector. Ivanka was in the country to attend the World Bank Summit on increasing opportunities for women. She hopes hundreds more international companies will join her quest in empowering women in Africa.
So today, in conjunction with the World Cocoa Foundation and all the private sector partners from great companies who join us here today, Administrator Green mentioned several of them, Mars and Cargill and Hershey and Nestle, who join us here on this site to celebrate what happens when you empower women and the opportunity that's created when you empower women, how they uplift their families, how they uplift their communities, and how whole countries prosper.
Zimbabwe may withdraw mining claims from companies that are taking too long to exploit the minerals as part of efforts to boost output in the strategic sector. Zimbabwe sits on the second largest known platinum deposits after neighboring South Africa. It also holds a significant chrome, gold and diamond resources. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya with more.
Zimbabwe plans to grow mineral revenues from a projected $4.2 billion this year to over $12 billion by 2023. To help achieve that, it will compel holders of claims to use them or lose them, a proposition that makes economic sense, but that needs to be approached with caution.
If a company, an individual, local or international investor has been holding on to a claim for a number of years, say for example more than 10 years, then obviously the government would need to intervene. But on the flip side, however, there is also the emotive property rights issue, where you would need to say someone who is holding on to a claim or an EPO, which is basically an explorative prospecting order, might say, I'm holding on to a property. So if someone is holding on to a property, that's the government would need to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
It's a potential minefield government is willing to navigate given the potential benefits based on recent precedent. There are almost 24,000 hectares of land behind me sitting on platinum claims that were held but not mined by Zimplats. In August 2018, they were granted to a new investor. Cairo Resources has sunk about $8 million in exploration, which it's confident will yield a significant ore body that could potentially be the largest platinum project in the country.
In terms of employment, last time we're estimating that this project at the final end, it will be employing around 15,000. But now the estimate is around 25,000 directly employed by this project. And at full production, it will be adding to the GDP by about 5 billion.
If achieved, that will not only set Zimbabwe on course to meet its 2023 target, but also vindicate authorities for their efforts to speed up returns from the country's vast mineral deposits. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Economic growth in South Africa will shrink by at least 1.1 percentage points in 2019. There will also be up to 125,000 job losses if nationwide electricity blackouts persist throughout the year, according to the Central Bank in its monetary review publication. Troubled state utility Eskom turned to load shedding across the country in February and March as low coal supplies, a severe cash crunch and multiple failures at its aging fleet of power stations affected supply. The review dimmed hopes for the economic rebound promised by President Cyril Ramaphosa and comes less than a month before national elections. Australian minerals company Orion Minerals has successfully raised $5.8 million needed to finish its bankable feasibility study. The company is looking to restart the Prieska copper and zinc mine in the Northern Cape in South Africa. In efforts to restructure, it has made plans to have 20% black ownership of the company and a further 10% ownership split between communities and employees. Here is CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more.
This isn't a new discovery. It was last mined in 1991. The mining rights were owned by Ripley Trading, who took over the asset in 2010. Ripley now has flipped up its ownership into the shareholding in the JSE-listed Orion Minerals entity. Orion now owns the Prieska project.
We had worked on it with minimal resources, and it has now become attractive to other parties, and in this instance, not only Orion or international shareholders, but also local black shareholders.
The company is now weeks away from a bankable feasibility study, and the BEE investors have been given an opportunity that doesn't come around very often.
If you look at the project itself, the turnaround, isn't that hefty. Within 3 years, after production starts, the mine breaks even. So we fairly confident, as much as there's a long, view on this thing, it's one of the quicker, I think, mines to get in production in turnaround.
The reason for the excitement is that it's an established discovery, and with the use of new technology, the upside is potentially huge.
The fact that they've decided to embrace transformation right in an early stage before even going into development, which means that the new BEE partners get a chance to invest before there is a material uplift in the value of the equity, is a really great thing, because that's a way of paying back.
While the South African mining sector remains a significant employer, this project is going to be almost fully automated.
At steady state, we expect this mine to employ about 800 people. Now, that's a lot of people, in the Prieska environment. The bottom line is the town won't be the same. In any other environment, 800 isn't that big, but for Prieska, that's significant. Direct employment. I think if you look at secondary, opportunities, we were looking at, anything between 1,500 and 2,000 jobs.
The project is a world-class zinc and copper ore body. There's nothing quite like it in the world. In geological terms, the Prieska large lens exceeds 90 million tons, and the experts say that the smaller lenses surrounding the large lens haven't been mined yet.
There are very few bodies like this that you could find in the world. In fact, the Prieska body, now we know, is actually the single largest volcanogenic massive sulfide VMS lens in the world.
The geologists and the empowerment partners are excited about the potential of this project. It's now down to see how it affects the local communities. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Access to market remains one of the biggest challenges facing small businesses and entrepreneurial startups in South Africa. It takes years of hard work and sometimes tears to get a foot into the door of the big retailers. One South African entrepreneur has not only managed to get her homemade pickles onto the shelves of Africa's biggest retailer, but has also just secured a spot in Shoprite's distribution center in the Western Cape. Let's take a look.
Exotic Taste formally started when I was at a crossroads. I was divorced, I was unemployed, I had 2 children that I needed to feed and look after. I was making the product part-time for 4 years before that. The recipe was a hand-me-down recipe from an old aunt. I had a good tasting product, but I didn't have a market for it. But Shoprite made it easy. I asked them, please can you guys take a chance on me and have my product in your stores? Junaid Isop was the buyer that I spoke to, and he agreed. And that was like, oh, this is a big foot. This is a big foot in the door. Everything is made by hand. I go to the market in the morning, procure my fresh fruit and vegetables. We process it, we cook it up, we pasteurize it to 80 degrees. It then gets bottled, labeled, shrunk, and then packed. I started out with 2 products, the lemon achar and the mixed veg achar. Today we have successfully distributed 8 products, 4 cooking sauces, 4 pickles to 51 stores in the Western Cape. You've come on a perfect day because the Shoprite head office has agreed to put us in the distribution center, and we are preparing 8 pallets of pickles and sauces for delivery. On a pallet of glass jar, there's 1,152 bottles that goes on there. We've got 4 pallets of that going out. The jump into the distribution center is big because the reach to more stores, more marketing, more sales is there. It's taken me 5 years to get to this point of my business growth. Shoprite Checkers have invested in me. They've held my hand through my growth phases. They've been the platform for me to build a product that is not only for any retailer but can also go internationally. There's a lot of things that happens when you move into the distribution center. Your growth is by far more. Currently, I employ 10 people. On site, we have 8, and then off site, we've got 2.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We catch up with the African voice actors and actresses behind some popular Chinese dramas on the continent.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's head to Egypt, where valuable alabaster statues, potteries, the goddess Sekhmet and mummies have been discovered in the Minya area in the northern region. The archaeological discovery of the Tuna El Gebal cemetery is one of the most important discoveries of modern times. The century-old site is one of the important ones in Egypt and has a history of more than 2,000 years. In the past 2 years, many ancient artifacts have been unearthed in joint archaeological ventures supported by the Egyptian government. Now, dubbing Chinese dramas into foreign languages to reach global audiences. It is a challenging but rewarding job for a group of African voice actors and actresses living in Beijing. CGTN reporter Wang Mengzhen follows their story to find out what role they are playing in enhancing the cultural bonds between China and Africa under the Belt and Road Initiative.
It's routine work for Happiness, a Tanzanian voice actress, dubbing Chinese dramas into Swahili. But back in her country, she was a famous on-camera celebrity.
I do acting for quite a little bit longer. Yeah, I started when I was a teenager. So I want to get different experience because I really like to learn new things like every day. Good thing there is another friend posted that in WhatsApp group. There is audition somewhere.
For her, it was a life-changing audition. Only 10 out of more than 2,000 were chosen, and she was one of them. But from stage to studio, it was not as easy as she thought.
At the beginning, it was a little bit hard. You can do things, dub maybe 5 minutes, and then you forget. Something came up. But at the end, I master all of those. I can even teach someone how to do it.
Happiness says now many of her fans enjoy watching Chinese dramas and can recognize her voice without seeing her face. The pay TV operator Star Times is behind the huge project, dubbing popular Chinese movies and series into local languages. Now it's serving more than 20 million users in 30 African countries. Happiness is just one of the 21 African voice actresses and actors working at Star Times, and since this dubbing center was established in 2011, more than 300 foreign staff have dubbed 11 languages here. Altogether, they've dubbed over 20,000 episodes for African viewers. Throughout the process, they're also learning more about Chinese culture.
Working with different cultures has really taught me a lot because being an African outside your country, you need to embrace the other culture of another country, not only the culture, like everything, the food.
We have different ways of cooking. We use salt a lot. When you get here, we find something with no salt, sometimes with no sugar.
And the comparison goes well beyond food.
Like in here, you can find there is so many things men can do for women. In the street, we can find a man holding a handbag of a woman. In my country, never.
Proud to be a bridge between China and Africa, Happiness and her colleagues are now hoping to make their voices more widely heard across their continent. Wang Mengzhen, CGTN, Beijing.
Support is pouring in from around the world following the devastating fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been pledged to restore the landmark, and the public will have a say in how one key part of the cathedral will look. CGTN Stefan de Vries explains.
Only 2 days after the fire that struck Notre Dame, the French government announced an international architecture competition to rebuild the spire of the cathedral that was destroyed in the flames.
Le concours international permettra de trancher la question.
This international competition will decide whether we will have to build a new spire, whether we should rebuild one similar to the old spire, identical, or if we need to, as is often done by redeveloping monuments, give the Notre Dame a new one, adapted to our era.
Parisians and tourists are still gathering near the cathedral to see with their own eyes what has happened to the beloved monument. But horror was replaced by hope.
The French Minister of Culture has announced that there is already enough money to start the rebuilding of the world-famous monument.
Donations have poured in from around the world for the restoration efforts. It is expected that the total amount pledged will reach €1 billion on Thursday, much to the delight of the French Prime Minister.
Je trouve que nous devons nous réjouir.
I think we should be very happy that, apart from all the emotions, a very large number of the French want to participate in these efforts.
Last night in a televised speech, President Emmanuel Macron promised the French that the cathedral would be even more beautiful and that it would be ready within 5 years. But experts are less optimistic. They think rebuilding Notre Dame may cost many, many decades. This is Stefan de Vries for CGTN in Paris.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Tottenham Hotspurs and Liverpool joined Barcelona and Ajax in the UEFA Champions League's Final Four.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born.